you like to say a few words?
Good morning. I won't be long. I just want to say I don't know a better way to commemorate coming up on the 4th year of Breonna's murder. I'm so grateful to have people in the room who continue to understand how important that what happened to Breonna never happens again. So I just thank you all for the work you are doing and will continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamika. I truly say this, I don't think any of us can imagine how difficult that is for your bravery, for you continuing to speak up and speak out. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today. Every day, since March 13th of 2020, every day, Tamika has fought for justice on behalf of Breonna. Every single day. And today marks day 1,459 without justice. What does that mean, justice? According to the Legal Information Institute at Cornell Law School, justice is the ethical, philosophical idea that people are to be treated impartially, fairly, properly, and reasonably by the law and the arbiters of the law. That laws are to ensure no harm befalls another. There is no question or debate. It was unjust when Louisville police officers lied in an affidavit to obtain the no-knock warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment. It was unjust that the raid was carried out so sloppily in the middle of the night, ignoring procedures to have an ambulance in place or turn on body cameras. It is unjust that Breonna Taylor is not still here with us today. Unfortunately, what happened to Breonna was not an aberration. Last year, the U.S. Department of Justice released a report that unequivocally found disturbing patterns of excessive force, unlawful executions of search warrants, systemic racism, and discrimination within the LMPD. And while the quest continues to have those responsible for Breonna's death answer for their actions, we must also look at the justness of no-knock warrants themselves. What happened here on March 13th of 2020 is not an isolated incident in our community or in our country. Dozens of civilians and law enforcement officers have died during no-knock raids across the United States. We know that executing no-knock warrants can be deadly, and that's why we did something about it in the Kentucky General Assembly and in Louisville, passing laws that restrict or outright ban the use of no-knock warrants. If we can do this in Kentucky, we can do this nationally, and we can do it across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, because it's the right thing to do, because it's the just thing to do. The Justice for Breonna Taylor Act will protect people, protect law enforcement officers, and ultimately make our community safer. Tamika has said many times that Breonna always wanted to save lives. We know she wanted more than that too. She wanted to live. She wanted a family. A no-knock warrant took all of that away from her. With this legislation, we can at least honor her first wish, ensure this never happens to anyone again. I want to thank Amber Duke from the ACLU, who's here with us today. I want to thank Representative Keturah Herron, who's with us here today, and for the role that they both played in passing Breonna's law here in Louisville and the partial no-knock ban at the state level. And now, I want to welcome Kentucky United States Senator Rand Paul, who introduced this same piece of legislation in the United States Senate a few years ago and is again leading this effort on the Senate side.
Thanks, Warren. Thank you. We first introduced this bill in, I think it was June of 2020, shortly after Breonna's death. And it's a tragedy that it took, this horrific, death to bring this about. Many people that I follow, other libertarian-leaning people, have been critical of no-knock raids for really a decade or more before this. There have also been people on the left, writing from the Washington Post, who have written and summarized this. One of the cases I remember from 2006 was a 92-year-old woman, Catherine Johnston, who was the victim of a no-knock raid. They came through the door, and she lived in a high-crime neighborhood and had a gun, and she shot back through the door, and then she was riddled with 39 bullets and killed. So it is a mistake. There's a better way of doing things. I do this not only because I care about the people behind the door, I also care about the police. I think it's a very dangerous raid for police to take, and there's a lot of better ways to arrest people that don't involve going in the middle of the night. None of this really stops emergencies. There still are emergencies, and all of those do exist, and we'll have emergencies where people do go in very quickly, but it shouldn't be the norm. It should be really the exception, and only under exceptional emergency conditions when someone's life is being threatened. But I'm glad that Congressman McGarvey has taken the lead on this now. We have Senator Cory Booker as a Democrat lead in the Senate, and I think it will be a bipartisan bill. It's linked to Department of Justice money, so you have to look for sort of a federal link that might affect policy. And so we say if your entity gets Department of Justice money, which is a lot of different entities, that you would be bound by the no-knock rules. And it also says that if it's a federal entity, so if it's a federal warrant that's being served, that you wouldn't have the no-knock raid as well. I'm very hopeful that this will move forward. I'm sorry that it took the death of Breonna to get everybody unified, but people say, why is there no bipartisanship? Well, we had a terrible tragedy, and now there is. The state legislature virtually unanimously passed this, almost all Republicans and Democrats, and then the Metro Council did as well. So if there's ever any good that came from this tragedy, I'm hoping that the law will change and that will prevent this from ever happening again. Thank you.
All right, Senator Paul and Congressman McGarvey are going to take some questions. In order to stay on time with our schedule, we'll try and do one question per outlet since there are so many of you here, and we are asking, out of respect, that the questions today stay on the topic of this bill. Thank you.
Senator Paul, since this didn't originally pass, it got stuck in committee back in 2020, what are your hopes now that things have changed and it's going to gain some traction?
I think being bipartisan helps. Cory Booker has been on it, and we're trying to engage more with him to become more active. The committees on our side are controlled by Democrats, so it's important for me to get a Democrat. On the House side, the committees are controlled by Republicans, so it would be important for Congressman McGarvey to find a Republican. But I think a lot of bipartisan bills pass, and sometimes things like this will break through. On our side, sometimes we actually end up passing things unanimously. So if we can get a little momentum, probably need to get it out of committee. We might try to see if it can pass unanimously, and they have something similar in the House where you can pass bills under short order.
Go ahead. I have nothing to add. Okay, go ahead.
Gentlemen, a question for both of you. With this legislation, had it been in place 4 years ago, would Breonna Taylor be alive today?
Everything that happened on March 13th was wrong. If there was a lie on the affidavit for the warrant was carried out in the middle of the night. No body cameras were turned on. No ambulance was present. There's so many things that went wrong. And they went wrong because of a legal structure that allowed so much of it to happen. That was in the no-knock warrant that was issued. I don't know that any of us can say what would or would not have happened 4 years ago. But what I can say is that if there was no-knock warrant that happened that night, I don't think that it would have been carried out that way. I think there is a much better likelihood that, as Senator Paul alluded to, so many people across the country would have had a different outcome. And let's focus on what no-knock warrants, what's the difference between a no-knock warrant and a regular warrant? Right? A regular warrant still allows police officers to enter a premises. It allows them to forcefully enter a premises. What a no-knock warrant does is it allows you to set these things up at a time like in the middle of the night. You don't have to announce yourselves and tell people who you are. And so that really can lead to very dangerous outcomes. I think if we ban this dangerous practice, then we won't have as many terrible outcomes like what we saw here in Louisville.
Okay, go ahead.
And I would just add to that, the local ordinance and the state ordinance are incredibly important. This is one additional step, actually. I think if the local ordinance and the state ordinance had been, that there's a good chance Breonna would still be alive if those had been in place previously.
All right, next question.
For the Senator, is there any reason why it stalled 4 years ago, and what gives you more confidence this time around?
I don't have a specific reason other than that typically things have to get through committee, and we're going to work it hard again. And it's really the Democrats control the Senate. I have to get a Democrat not only on the bill but interested and active in it, and I think they will, because Senator Booker's come to us on this, seeing that we were introducing it again. So my hope is that we will be able to get it through. And the one thing I will try, and I don't believe we tried last time, is just putting it out there and see if anybody objects. If someone objects, sometimes you can then, rather than going through all the steps, if one person objects, you go to that person and say, well, what would it take to get you on? And then sometimes there is a negotiation. Something changes a little bit in the bill to get it to move forward. So we'll see. But I'm going to work hard on it this time. And I think having Morgan in the House active, both of us from Kentucky, I think is good.
I'd just add to that briefly. While I'm new to Washington and Senator Paul's in his third term, when I started in Frankfurt, it was divided government. And in that time, the Senate was Republican, the House is Democratic. And I know that most of what you see is dysfunction when you think about government. But divided government does give an opportunity to get things done. And it gets an opportunity to get things done where there is agreement. And where we have agreement on this is we want our communities to be safer. We want our citizens to be safe and to be free from unreasonable search and seizure in their homes. We want to protect our first responders. That's what banning no-knock warrants does. It makes our community safer, ultimately. It protects people in their homes. It protects the law enforcement officers who have to serve these warrants. And so maybe in divided government, this gives us an opportunity to make some progress, particularly when you have Democrats and Republicans coming together on the same issue.
All right, next question.
Senator Paul had mentioned that Cory Booker was joining him on the Senate side. Is there anyone in particular in the House or in Congress that is interested in signing on from the other party?
Yes, and you know, this is one of those things. We were Senator Paul and I have been working on this for a couple of months now. We met in your office maybe last year, late last year, or was it this year? It's a little bit of a time warp, but we've been working on this for a few months together. We didn't want to come out with a Republican sponsor before he had a Democrat. Senator Booker joined on late last week. We're going to find a Republican in the House. I do know of other people who are already interested, even from Kentucky. Yep.
I just wonder if the congressman and senator or anybody else standing up there has any words for our viewers on what they might do today, or what they encourage viewers to do today to stop and just, remember what happened 4 years ago today.
Go ahead.
I'm a Louisvillian. I think all of our community is trying still to heal from this. It's hard for me right now standing here with Tamika Palmer, with Breonna Taylor's mom, who endured a pain that, while many of us share, cannot fathom. What we have to say, though, as we try to continue to heal, as we try to continue to find justice, that Breonna Taylor's death will not be in vain. There have been some good things that have happened. Louisville's banned no-knock warrants. Kentucky's banned no-knock warrants. The Department of Justice has come in and investigated many of the abhorrent practices in the Louisville Metro Police Department. But we can't stop. And I think one of the things that Tamika has told me is she doesn't like to talk about and remember the day Breonna died. What we like to celebrate is her birthday. And that birth is a renewed sense of purpose. And so if 4 years later you are still looking for that purpose, that renewed sense of purpose, call your legislators. Call your federal representatives. We're 2 out of 8 right here in Kentucky. There are others. Tell Senator McConnell to support this bill. Tell the other congressmen in Kentucky to support this bill. Continue to push for that healing, for that resolution, for that purpose, so that we know Breonna Taylor didn't die in vain.
I think it's important also to remember there's a whole chain of events that happens for this to have occurred. And it starts with the judge. And the judge made a decision, which I think was an incorrect, bad decision. And judges still have a lot of leeway on giving warrants. So I can tell you an example of a judge I know, and even not no-knock warrants, when he gives a warrant to a policeman to go to someone's house to serve papers that say you're delinquent in your child support. No big deal. Well, these are dangerous situations. Police officers get shot all the time in these. And his point of view is, let's send them one more notice. And it's not that the person there is, they're breaking the law. You have to do something ultimately. But his point is, I'm going to send one more notice to save the policeman one more trip out there. Maybe this person comes in voluntarily, because it is very, very dangerous to go to anyone's house, even during the broad daylight, even with a regular warrant where you're going to knock. The one out in Prestonsburg that happened. There was a crazy guy with a long-range rifle that was shooting policemen from 100 yards away. A police officer was shot in his car, but they were, I think, serving a warrant on either some kind of divorce thing or children. So just the idea of all of us thinking more about trying to figure out ways if someone has broken the law and I'm not saying we coddle people who've broken the law, but you have to figure out, is there a way to safely get someone into custody as opposed to recklessly doing it? And I think everybody is hopefully trying to do a better job, but this includes the judges. The judges really need to be more conscious of what they're doing, and at least now there are no-knock raids in Jefferson County.
So on that note, you already brought up that, Kentucky already has this policy in place, and Representative Hare, maybe this is a question for you, but what more do you want to see happening in Kentucky? And that could be on a national level, but to break that cycle that's happening, the process before we got to the no-knock warrant itself.
The good news is that 29 states already restrict no-knock warrants in some way, shape, or form. The bad news is that every estimate still has tens of thousands of no-knock warrants happening in this country every year. We think this legislation is necessary because it will continue to halt the practice of no-knock warrants in Kentucky and nationwide. And it's very effective. As Senator Paul said, this is tied to funding. We know this works. What's the national drinking age in the United States? The answer, there isn't one. But the drinking age is tied to federal highway money. And if you want your federal highway money, you've got to be 21 years old to drink in any state in the country. So every state in the country has a drinking age of 21 years old. That's what we're doing here. We're saying we are tying this law enforcement money to banning no-knock warrants. We think it will be very effective in truly minimizing the practice, except for the most exigent and egregious circumstances where it can be justified.
Do you have any other questions?
A question for Ms. Palmer, a question about.
Ms. Palmer's not taking questions today. Thank you so much.
Just want to know, how are you doing?
I'm okay. It's been 4 years. It's been hard. It continues to be hard, but I still fight, and I still make sure that what happened to Breonna doesn't happen again. And that's really what's important here. Thank you.
Any last questions for Senator Paul or Representative McGarvey?
Either of you have any insight on the consent decree negotiations going on with the LMPD right now, at the federal level, and any expectations?
We're keeping everything on the topic of this bill today. Yeah. All right.
Are there any more mechanics of the bill that you can get into, or we're going to be able to read it later?
So today,
We've got
today.
copies of the bill text.
Oh, you guys are amazing. And I was going to say both of our offices will be sending out press releases shortly after with quotes from our respective senator and congressman, as well as the bill text and a little bit of background on the bill. So we should have that out. Thank you all so much. You guys.